So continuing on with the topic, our next speaker, since 2006, has been the General Manager of People and Business Services. Now, this organisation is responsible for the effective deployment and ongoing development of staff within ACC. This role is responsible for the marketing, communications and ACC's legal function. Over the past 13 years, Denise has held senior management positions not only in human resources development, but also in organisational management, strategy, planning and communications. Prior to joining ACC, Denise was the Assistant Auditor General of Strategy at the Office of the Auditor General. So please join with me in welcoming Denise Cosgrove.
Thank you, Adrian. And just a little update on my background. I've recently taken over as a General Manager of Claims Management for ACC, so running the operational part of ACC, including the health purchasing bit. So thank you very much for attending the session and for the opportunity to share with you some of the learning that ACC has been undertaking about how we better manage the scheme over the last couple of years. And I guess despite some of the constructs that Michael just talked to you about the existence of things like full funding and legislative framework in terms of entitlements, it would be fair to say, as most of you know, that ACC has been facing some issues in terms of its performance. And our costs and liabilities have been increasing significantly, or had been increasing significantly since about 2004. Now, some of that was related to a range of factors. There was a significant increase in claims volumes, but it would be fair to say that we have to take some rap for that ourselves as an organisation in terms of our own performance, particularly around the management of longer-term claims and rehabilitation rates at the front end. And so what I wanted to share with you today is actually just some of the things that we've been doing to address those concerns within the constructs of the insurance model that we work in. And in a simple sense, we, I guess if you imagine a bit of a pendulum between a social welfare system and an insurance system, one might argue that the pendulum had swung a little bit too far in terms of the social welfare end over the last few years, and we've been trying to redress that balance. But at the end of the day, it's neither one nor the other. It's always somewhere in between those two. We need to focus on, managing the costs and liabilities, but also improving the outcomes for, achieving quality outcomes for clients. So I'll skim over these. That's the horror tale in terms of long-term claims, but you can see that it's nicely pointing downwards at the moment, which is great. And there's the increases in healthcare costs, which have been rising outside of ACC's abilities to control, really. So we've been tackling the problem in two ways. The first is looking at levy increases, and the second is really around operational changes. And I'll talk more about the operational changes, given I've probably got more knowledge about those things. But it would be fair to say that there has been a significant shortfall on the amount of levies collected to the amount that's actually needed to fund it. And if you look at the concept of full funding, we were on a time frame to fully fund by 2014. And that's now been extended out to 2019. And what's needed to happen there is to make sure that we maintain levy rates at a level that will essentially meet the costs. So what we do is we look at the injuries that occurred in a year, and we have to fully fund for the lifetime of those injuries. So as an example, if you have a child that is shaken at birth and is injured from birth, who will possibly live to 80, we need to provide care and support and then cost how much that's going to incur for the lifetime of that cost. So it's quite significant. And if you look at a long-term claim, we know that after 5 years of someone being on the scheme, it's usually incredibly difficult for a person to leave the scheme because a range of things have happened in their lives that maybe, have made it harder for them to get back to work. But what our actuaries do is say once someone hits 5 years, they will fully factor that. So that means they will factor that person until they retire. So the cost of keeping that person on the scheme until they retired at 65. So if they're only in their 40s, that's 25 years to be paid for. So that's the challenge that addressed us. Now we've hit that on a range of fronts, and while I've got there 3 key programs of work, I guess the most significant was the underpinning cultural change in the organisation. It was about shifting the focus of our people from customer service essentially, to focusing on cost and liability management. And I've been impressed, and actually external people who've done reviews of the organisation have talked about the impressive swing in the focus of the organisation towards cost and liability management. We ran a range of workshops early on in the piece. We called them Driving Value for Money, and it was our staff who identified areas that we should focus on, areas where maybe we were being too liberal in our interpretation of the legislation. I mean, they obviously did all the things like say, we don't need the coffee in the fish tank, but it was more around the stuff that was impacting on the scheme and the entitlements and our interpretation of those. So that's been quite fundamental. But we have done a range of initiatives, and these three represent them, and most significant from my point of view is around the front end and the better claims management. So we've looked at that from a range of angles. Control the gateway better. So making sure that only people who are covered by the legislation receive the services that we provide. Now that's a difficult one because cover is very broad in terms of the ACC legislation. Essentially, if you whack your hand against this table and you hurt yourself from that, you're covered. But to go on from being covered to receive entitlements is a different threshold, it's a different hurdle.